Hi, and welcome to the tnkgrl Mobile Podcast. I think this is number 106, which is all a lie because I started at 101. I have a great guest today. The fabulous Chris Davies is here to join me. Hi, Chris.
Hi, Miriam. Good. Though now that I've found out you've been lying about the number all the time,
Well, I've done a lot. I've gotten many podcasts under my belt, both for my own podcast and for Engadget Mobile. And it's definitely more than 100, but I thought it'd be funny to start with 101 when I rekindled the podcast, you know?
No, okay. I can
so
forget.
you're like,
Yeah.
This is 106, and the date today is July 27th, 2014, and that gives you some context as to what we're going to talk about, obviously. What is our topic today? I think there's a bunch of phones we want to talk about, perhaps, and most importantly, maybe it's not important, but the big news, I think, in the last couple of weeks has been Microsoft and all these layoffs, and, what does it mean for Nokia's division within Microsoft and all that. I kind of be curious to hear your thoughts on that. So that's kind of what I thought the topics would be today.
I think as long as we reserve the right to ramble, then I think that's a great idea.
I think we should. So,
yes.
So Chris, since speaking of rambling, what are the phones right now that are really like in your pocket, that you're really loving, that you're really into?
Well, I mean, I'm recommending Amazon's Fire Phone to everybody I meet.
And this is sarcasm, right?
This is sarcasm. I realise that the accent makes it tricky. I should have something that flashes up on the bottom of the screen. Unfortunately, that is sarcasm. Maybe not so much the Amazon Fire Phone. LG G3, I think, is a great phone. I think you think the same.
Yes, I love the G3. I'm still in my pocket. Yeah.
I think at the moment that is probably one of the devices it would be my go-to recommendation phone, I think. If someone came to me and stopped me in the street, as so often happens, and says, Chris, help.
They do that. They stop you, and they're like, Chris, help me.
You should see the bruising across my shoulders. My clavicles have never been the same.
Help me, Obi-Wan.
Yes.
Right. No, I feel the same. I think the G3 is a solid package. I really enjoy overall what it does, how it works. It's in my pocket still. I still have my Nexus 5 as my main phone, and I have an iPhone 5S floating around.
I also have an iPhone 5S. I think there's a lot to be said for Apple's ecosystem, and you can't escape from it. Certainly in this business, you can't escape from it. And it's a solid recommendation, despite the fact that how old now. We've moved on some months since they announced it, and it's still a very good phone.
It's kind of, I feel the same about the Nexus 5, yet it's almost like 9 months or something old, yet it doesn't feel older than the current flagships in any way. Like it just performs to me just as well. Do you feel that way too?
I have a love-hate thing with the Nexus 5. I think for the price, don't get me wrong, it's a bargain. It's an incredible bargain. For me, I've never kind of got past that impression that it's like a reference design. I think,
right.
LG just kind of went into their labs and said, we're really busy building our own things. Let's give them this reference design that we had to test out this processor and this display and this camera, and then we'll stick Nexus 5 on the back and we'll give it to Google. And I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing, because I think that probably helped them keep price down here, but it doesn't have the same kind of charm, perhaps, as some devices out there, and I do miss that at times.
Speaking of charm, one of my current little love affairs is with the Desire H16. I know I'm a little late to the party for this one, because I think it came out, it was announced at Mobile Congress.
It was.
And it came out, like, I think you guys got them like around March-ish, April-ish. I just never got one until I finally got one, and it's a solid mid-range phone that I'm very happy with. I love the design. I think it looks really stunning.
I think you're right. I think HTC has been really on a roll recently with their design. I think most people in the industry love the M8 for its construction, its design. I think they did a really good job with the M8 Mini, or whatever it was called in the end, the One Plus Mini Tiny.
Yeah, the naming is so terrible. I think it's called the HTC One Mini 2.
That's right. Yes, I knew it was something ridiculous.
For better or worse.
Yes, generally worse, yes.
Yes, and it's interesting because the Desire H16 I have is a European model, so it doesn't have an NFC, which some of the Asian models have.
Mm-hmm.
and it doesn't have any bands that really work in the US except for 850 megahertz on HSPA plus, which means it limits it to using on an AT&T SIM because you can't get 3G with T-Mobile. But so I don't recommend the phone I don't recommend you buying one to use in North America because it's going to be very limited. But if you are in Europe or in Asia, it's definitely a worthy candidate. There's a lot of bezel. It's a big phone despite, if you compare them, I have one here, so I might as well just pull it out. And I want to show you something. So this is what the phone looks like. Whoa. Zoom back a bit. It's a white one. It's very beautiful, very classy.
It is.
It's shiny in the back, but it's matte on the sides and matte in the front, and it's got the boom sound, which are really looking pretty hot. But here, if I turn on the display, you'll immediately see that, maybe I shouldn't show you this, but like you'll see how much bezel there really is, right?
There is an awful lot of bezel.
And that's one of the HTC's kind of like failures this year with all their phones, I think. Because look, here, I understand this is what I'm holding right now, the Desire 816 is a Snapdragon 400. It's a mid-range phone with a 720p display. But if you look at this, the G3, same size screen, 5.5 inches, right? So you're looking at the same screen, yet look at the size difference between these two phones.
And I think some of it is perhaps they're accommodating those boom sound chambers, which you do get
that's true.
The awesome audio quality, which is probably better than the LG. I think if you're the kind of person who listens to
far better
music on their phone or plays a lot of games and likes that doesn't do it with headphones and annoys people on the bus, maybe, I think
watch video.
Yeah, watch video. It's a fantastic phone for that, but you do have to then accommodate it.
So, but in terms of specs, it's essentially the same as the One Mini 2, but it lacks the NFC, and of course it's the same 13 megapixel autofocus non-OIS camera that is not as good in low light as the M8, but I think it's pretty decent.
Again, it was a solid camera, and I think this is going to be one of HTC's problems moving forward with the flagship series, that they put a decent, reliable camera in the One Mini 2. One Mini 2.
Right.
Which it didn't have any of the ultra-pixel magic. And I'm a big fan of ultra-pixel. I love the idea. I like the idea of HTC going for a camera which doesn't just try and squeeze in as many megapixels as possible. It tries to do something clever with them. But for two generations, they've had the same on-paper resolution. They've had the same sensor effectively, and it's and then they made it worse in a way by removing OIS. They did, yes.
Right. And so, that's my beef. It's like it's funny that I have this conversation with almost every single person that's been on my podcast since the M8 got launched, which is the lamentation of the lack of OIS or the lack of resolution or both. To me, an 8 or 13 megapixel with OIS, I think 8 would be the sweet spot because you can make the pixels a little bit bigger, gather a bit more light. If you kept that f/2.0 lens and put OIS and put an 8 megapixel in there, knowing HTC's know-how and the awesome new UI that lets you do full manual mode, you'd be golden. And then maybe the One Mini 2 has a 13 with no OIS like it does today, and it's fine. That's kind of what I would have done, because those 13 megapixel pixels on both the Mini 2 and the Desire 816 are pretty tiny. You see the noise in low light. It certainly affects it. But with OIS, that would probably be a better solution. So I don't know. I'm kind of torn here because I love the pictures I get out of the M8, particularly of the M7 because of OIS. And then I want to zoom and I go, and then it all falls apart, right?
Or unless you're happy with a picture kind of the size of a postage stamp.
Which, and all pictures look pretty good at the size of a postage stamp, right?
Just ask the Queen, yes.
Yes, good point. But anyway, so enough of that. You're probably not 100% aware of this because you have better things to worry about, but I did publish 4 reviews in the last 2 weeks.
No, I saw them. I did.
Finally, 4 days in a row, I was on a total roll.
I'm a little terrified, actually.
Yeah, they were not all recorded at the same time, but I finally did the editing one every night. And so it was the G3, the Padphone X, the, I'm forgetting one, something, and then the GS5. Now I have to look at my blog. This is ridiculous. I don't even remember what I've done.
It's these things happen to us all. So out of the 4, including one mysterious phone, which was
it's the LG G Pro 2.
Oh.
which I'm also late to the party with.
Well, a little, but again, another interesting phone.
Very interesting. I
Certainly.
really enjoyed it.
Yes, I mean, I spent some time with a Korean version, which is always fun because then you get
That's
the
the one I
pull-out
have too.
antenna, so you can pretend.
My G3, yesterday I did this. I pulled out the antenna on my G3 because some of my friends were like, "Oh, we bought the G3." And I was like, "Mine is still better than yours."
Yeah, because mine can summon Kit from Knight Rider.
I know. It's so awesome when you do that. You pull out the little antenna on the Korean phones and you go outside at a coffee shop and you say, "Wait, I can't hear you," and you start adjusting the antenna. People are flabbergasted. Try it sometime. It's amazing.
I'm a big fan of retracting antennas. I have my very first phone ever was a Motorola StarTAC with shell, with the original one with the pull-out antenna, and I loved that phone. And I broke it a few years after I sat on it, and it was just it had too much. I make no comment about my weight. And then so I bought another one a couple of years ago, just like there was a company selling them. They were original stock, and
so you bought a new one?
I bought a new one. It was like, I think, $40 or something. It was
wow.
It was ridiculous. But I love it just for being able to flip it open and close it and pull the antenna in and out. There is something so tactile about that. I think young people of today haven't hung up on someone in anger until they've angrily snapped shut a StarTAC and then cursed at it afterwards.
Yes, no. If you go you're talking, fuck you.
Exactly. Snap, and then
I mean, you feel so much better.
Yeah, and you don't get that on a.
No. Now you just want to throw your phone at the wall and break it.
You break a lot more phones that way. I go through an iPhone a week. I have a lot of
thank God you have an unlimited supply, because just like me, every time you mention Apple on your podcast or in any article, you make $50 instantly.
I'm looking out the window now and I can see the Apple truck pulling up, just unloading the week.
Did you just break an iPhone?
I do it just
Did
generally.
you just... You threw one, didn't you?
I'm sitting on like a chair made of iPhones. I bounce and I crack the screens. Yeah.
What caused you to be angry at your iPhone this time?
Oh, I have no idea where to take this lie, and it could go in so many directions. No,
please go for it.
No, for some reason I want to say Angela Lansbury. I'm not sure why.
It's quite possible.
It is. I love Angela Lansbury, though.
I think we can blame her for many things.
We can, but she's a wonderful woman. You just wouldn't want to be one of her relatives, because the number of times that they get accused of murder and she has to go and rescue them.
She's kind of like Mary Poppins. You don't want to mess with her.
No.
She has superpowers.
She does. I wonder what she's doing right now. If anyone knows, please let Miriam know. I would.
Let us both know.
Yeah.
Tweet about it right now.
Yes, I'm looking at my phone now, and
we'll check the Twitters.
Yeah. Oh, and actually, now that I check the Twitters, Stefan has a question.
I see that.
Yes.
Who would know the answer to that?
Do you see how I segue into that?
It was fantastic.
Thank you. I wrote it here myself. 2 questions. First one, if you had to buy a phone today, which would it be and why?
Well, I think the G3 is pretty much a solid candidate.
I would agree with you. I think Samsung is going to do something to compete with the display, and
yes, I actually heard from somebody from Samsung when I was in New York that they're working on a Galaxy S5 made of metal.
Now you see, that would be an interesting phone.
That has a Quad HD display. So those of you who are suckers, because you are, just let's put this out there right now. Those of you who bought GS5s are suckers.
Yeah.
Right? It's a given that if you bought a GS5, you shouldn't have.
I believe actually that's the official Samsung tagline at the moment. You bought this, you suckers.
Yes, that's right. GS5, the sucker phone.
Or just Galaxy.
Galaxy, yes. You fail. But no, look, the point is, I reviewed so it took me a while to get a GS5. You're going to say, why did I just review the GS5? It's been out forever. But because some manufacturers love me and some don't. And it seems to be somehow, I don't know, Chris, for you, but somehow it seems to me it's related and correlated to how much I love their phones.
Really? How strange.
So I get them from LG and from HTC and from Nokia very much, easily. And Apple, of course, and Google, of course, because they're all friends. But But somehow Samsung takes a little longer before they give me phones. I don't know why.
Well, I think Samsung at the moment, they're definitely doing well. I think there's an awful lot of demand for Samsung devices. So perhaps it's just literally they can't produce enough of them.
Clearly not enough to give me one. So anyway, just kidding. But I think you'll see, this is more to my listeners and my readers. I think you will see that I was very fair in my GS5 review. I found some really good things, and I will reiterate them here, and you'll probably just agree or disagree. I don't know. It'd be interesting to get your take. I think the display is one of the best in terms of calibration and accuracy that I've ever seen.
Yes.
And that makes me very happy because, unfortunately, I can't say that about the G3 or even the HTC One M8. They're very good. If you look at them like individually,
yes.
Wow, fantastic. But as soon as you start putting them side by side, I think you and I have this kind of luxury.
It's first world phone reviewer problems.
We are able to put them side by side, and then when we do, the entire universe falls apart. The black holes get created because we realize that the GS5 actually has the best display of all of them.
I think, yeah, I would not argue with you, and I think it does still make a very compelling argument for why you don't need to go over 1080p. I mean, the G3's display is beautiful, and looking at it, again in isolation, you kind of think with that resolution, it's so smooth. I want this phone, and then you think, well, actually, why do I need that resolution?
You don't. In fact, I think there's room for a G2-like phone with the laser autofocus camera, because really, that's the thing, and the fact that you remove the battery cover and get a micro SD card in there and all these other things. Because honestly, the G2 was so good already.
It was, yeah. Well, I think this is the problem that a lot of the manufacturers are facing at the moment. They're making very good phones, and then how do you improve on that? And you can improve on that from our perspective by throwing more specifications in, and you make a more exciting device that way. From the consumer's perspective, it's, how many people are going to do anything over the next 2 years of their contract with AT&T or whoever with an LG G3, which actually makes the most of that display? And I doubt there will be many people who do.
I agree. I think that maybe LG can be smart and make a 1080p display version that's slightly smaller of the G3. I
think phones
slightly
that have
cheaper,
higher specs but are smaller and have smaller displays, I think that's a really untapped niche in the market.
Like the Z1 Compact, which I think is to this day one of the only phones that's smaller but doesn't sacrifice anything.
Yes, no, definitely.
So kudos to Sony for doing it right, unlike, say, Samsung and HTC, who have not succeeded yet in truly scaling down a flagship.
No, the One Mini 2 comes closer than the original One Mini.
Much better, right? Much better.
Yeah, which wasn't great. We won't mention HTC's 2013 too much, but
yes.
Yeah, no, I think there is a market, as the iPhone shows, of people who want a smaller device that nonetheless doesn't sacrifice too much in the way of specifications.
Yet, ironically, Apple is going to make a 4.7 or 5.5-inch iPhone.
So the rumors would have us believe.
I think that's fascinating because 5.5-inch seems awfully large for me. Like, I mean, I'm on board, but I'm a long-time user of large phones. And the G3 with its small bezel certainly does not feel like a 5.5-inch phone. So Apple could do a very good job at keeping it compact. But 4.7 seems like a pretty good sweet spot. With little bezel, it might barely be bigger than a current iPhone 5S.
I agree. I think the 5.5 always seems like a very odd add-on to the rumor to me. I mean, 4.7 just seems to make perfect sense. I mean, they want a phone which is bigger, which kind of satisfies that sort of the size comparison thing with all of the Android devices out there. I think people are using their phones for media more and that kind of thing. 4.7 makes a lot of sense, especially if you're Apple and you have really good design skills and construction skills, and you can make a phone which doesn't feel huge and unwieldy. I think 5.5 is just it's a very big screen, and I find it hard to imagine using iOS on a display that size. I think that they definitely have everything there set up to accommodate that. I think they did some very interesting and kind of underrated things at WWDC this year about how developers will be able to make applications that scale more interestingly and kind of more intelligently to suit different orientations and screen sizes, which at the time was kind of billed as being an iPad size thing, but actually kind of made more sense as a phone size thing, and how to design for phones ranging from kind of 4.7 and upwards. I think they can definitely do it. I'm looking forward to being surprised as to how they do it.
Yeah, I think iOS 8 is going to help a lot. I think the combination of a larger phone and iOS 8 is going to work well for those of us who want to be more productive.
Definitely.
Right. I mean, on iOS, my biggest gripe is it's hard for me to be productive for, three main reasons: the screen size, and the fact that everything is really small. I have shitty eyes, and typing on a keyboard, I pretty much have to put a landscape to use it.
Yeah.
And then the other two, number two is multitasking is kind of broken. I mean, it's not efficient. It's not it doesn't work very well, I don't think. And then three, the inter-app communication that they fixed with some APIs, which let me chain together apps in Android in such a productive way that it's hard for me to break away from that.
Definitely. I think of all the things to do with iOS, I think that latter point is one of the ones that still frustrates me so much to this day. The idea of you can share things with certain apps, but if Apple hasn't kind of given it the green light, then you're stuck. And you have to kind of go through some kind of weird backdoor kind of way of importing things. I want to be able to pick what I do with my data on the phone. The iPhone camera is great, but if you want to upload that picture directly to Google Plus, for instance, you're out of luck.
Exactly.
You have to kind of go through it the other way around, and you learn how to do that, kind of these klutzy kind of ways of managing it. But I think,
you remember how we were talking about the flip phone and saying "fuck you" and then closing it, and that satisfaction you get of that thumpy, clicky sound?
Yeah.
That's how I feel every time I try to work around Apple's limitations on iOS. I want to take that iPhone that I have and just throw it. I get so angry with it because I feel like I have a problem to solve. I need to solve it now. I'm usually in a rush because I'm in a position where I'm not in front of my laptop, and this is getting in my way, and I get really angry about it.
Yeah, you don't want to have to learn to accommodate the foibles of an OS. That OS should accommodate you. And I think you can certainly see where, in the heyday of the iPhone, or the original days of the iPhone, when it made a lot of sense for them to do it that way. It was people were confused. People were out there stumbling and falling around. We just
they do that. They do that no matter what. Just look out your window right now.
They're
stumbling. And they're confused. They're very confused.
They are. Well, I mean, yes, that's true. Though I have hung large naked photos of myself outside the building, so I mean that often confuses them. It depends what you define by work.
Confusing and making them stumble.
Oh yes, that definitely. I live on something of a hill, and it's always entertaining to watch them go rolling past. But yeah, I think Apple pitched it right in the beginning. Because people didn't know about, well, okay, so what can I do? People needed to have their hands held, and, well, what do I do with my photos? Well, why don't you take them onto the internet? Which is great.
The internet.
The internet. It's with a capital I and a capital T, in fact. No, that's the T in the, not in the middle of internet, because then that would be internet, which wouldn't work. But now people know, people Instagram and people tweet and people Snapchat and people share photos that they probably oughtn't share, and there are lots of ways for you to take a photo of yourself in an ill-advised position and send it to a lot of people.
Children.
And the children, if anything, are thinking of lots of things to do, and they're not able to do it because Apple is saying, well, you can only share with Facebook and Twitter and upload it to iCloud.
Yes, and that's not what children want to do. They want to do.
Find me a child that wants to upload to iCloud, and I will find you
naked pictures.
Not of the child.
No, of you.
Of me, obviously. Plenty of those flying about.
So, speaking of other large flagships, this is another phone that I received this week.
Ooh, so bright.
It's so bright, isn't it? Look at this orange. Yeah. It is the Lumia 930, and look, it's so bright that it lights up my hand.
Oh my goodness!
Look at it.
You're like something from a Sony TV commercial.
I know it's kind of I specifically requested an orange one because it's fantastical.
You could blind beasts with that.
Yeah, totally. It's incredibly orange. I love it. I mean, it's I have a Nokia Icon, which is very much the same phone, except that the Icon still hasn't received 8.1. And this has 8.1 out of the box.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if you had a chance to play with the 930, if you're reviewing one right now or whatever.
I personally, I'm not reviewing it. Another guy on our team is. I've played with it. I've played with the icon with 8.1 on it actually, and so.
Oh, good.
Um,
What's your take on that? What's your take on?
Of which?
Well, okay, but two things. What's your take on the current, essentially the current Nokia flagship, which is both the icon and the 930, and what's your take on 8.1? Separate questions.
Okay, I think I really like the icon in the 930. I'm going to say icon just because it's easier. I really like the phone. You know, I think the construction is great. I think if it maybe is a little, you have to like that sort of monolithic style.
It is kind of like, especially the icon, which is black on black.
Yes.
It feels like that that rectangle in 2001: A Space Odyssey.
It does. It's an obelisk.
Which instantly makes me want to drop acid and watch the film again.
Right. I mean, again, children, just like you shouldn't be sending naked photos of yourself, I wouldn't recommend taking acid. But do watch 2001: Space Odyssey, because it's a great film.
I hope no children are watching.
Well,
if they are, you know, we've all done acid. We've all done acid at some point. Anyway, I'm just going to actually show you guys this because it's fantastical again. But look at this display. It's just as beautiful. This is orange, by the way. It looks red here on the video, but most of these icons are orange. What I'm trying to point out is how little bezel there is on this phone.
It's very good.
It's the same size as the Nexus 5, and it's also it's a 5-inch, right? Yeah, it's 5-inch.
It is 5-inch.
So 5-inch display, same size, and same physical phone size as the Nexus 5. So very little bezel, which I think is awesome. Because, frankly, this is what I like about phones today, is how little bezel they have. Then you can kind of swallow the very squarish monolithic because it feels manageable, you know?
It does. It doesn't feel like they've wasted space. Unnecessarily.
Correct.
I think it's a little bit deep. If I was going to,
it's a little thick. Yeah, here.
It's not the yeah, exactly. I mean, if you look at it, it's kind of it's a chubby little phone, but I think it feels fantastic. That metal edge is really nice. I think the matte finish plastic on the back.
Yeah. Speaking of which, I'm just going to hold it up again so people can kind of see the thickness. Speaking of which, you know how Xiaomi launched the Mi 4 this week.
Yes.
And almost everyone's comparing the Mi 4 to the iPhone because of the chamfered edge. But to me, this is what they should compare it to, because it's the same architecture, right? This metal frame that goes all the way around with glass front and a plastic back, which is exactly what this is. This is missing the chamfer here along the edge on the screen. But other than that, I think their phone looks to me more like the Icon or the 930 than it does the iPhone. But
it does. I think the only problem is that so few people have heard of the Icon that if you said, "Oh, it's not like a Nokia Icon," people would be like,
"That's right." You totally have a point. What's your take on 8.1?
8.1 is such a huge step forward in Windows Phone that I just think Microsoft's teams need a huge amount of congratulations for doing that. I think that for what they achieved in that, from basically coming at the 8.1 as being, okay, there were a couple of things that we wanted to put in there, and then they managed to squeeze so much more in there and make such a step up that it belies its 0.1 difference.
It's staggeringly good.
Yes, it is. I mean, it's much greater a step forward, I would say, than 7 to 8 was.
Oh, by far. And I'm really impressed. I'm just starting to, because honestly, I had 8.1 briefly installed in my 1520, but it was, I don't know, it was kind of buggy, so I just went back to like the factory reset. But this one, obviously, it's baked in right from the beginning, and I'm like, wow.
Yes.
So just to be clear, for those of you who are lusting after a 930, there are some issues you should be aware of. The first one is that, similar to the Desire 816, actually, the LT bands are not compatible with the US at all. If you buy, this is a European model I have. If you want HSPA Plus, no problem. It supports 850 and 1900, which both work on T-Mobile and AT&T. No AWS, though, which basically means some markets of T-Mobile are going to be a little wonky in terms of 3G. So be prepared that you're going to sacrifice a little bit in terms of connectivity performance if you get one of these phones. And here's the interesting thing, Chris, I don't know if you know, but the icon is unlocked from Verizon. So if you buy a full price icon and take out the Verizon SIM and put an AT&T or T-Mobile micro SIM out of the box, it'll work.
No, that's interesting. No, I did not know that.
And it's the same bands, so it will work on 850, 1900, no AWS, and of course no LTE. So,
Okay.
so you get the same result. The advantage of the 930 is that it's factory 8.1. You don't have to wait for an upgrade, and that you get this funky colored back, either green or white or this crazy fluorescent orange.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a bit funkier looking because it's not black on black.
It's a very good phone. I think there are reasons why I don't use a Windows phone as my everyday device, which is mainly about some of the apps that I rely on every day. I use Google Plus a lot. There isn't a Google Plus app.
Yes.
We use Hangouts a lot for work. There isn't a Hangouts app. Just these little omissions. But I think for people out there who don't have those kind of app hang-ups, perhaps Windows Phone has become a really good, really strong competitor.
I agree. I mean, it's starting to catch up a bit on apps. One of the things I want to say is, speaking of Google Plus, and one of the biggest gripes I have with Windows Phone is the lack of good Google Plus integration. Now, if you can live without Hangouts, which you and I can't, but if you can, there is a new app that's actually called G Plus, like small G capital Plus, on the Windows Phone Store or whatever it's called, Windows Marketplace. And it is a native app. It is not a web browser encapsulating G Plus.
Okay.
And it's good. It's very good. Kevin Toffel of GigaOM pointed that out on social media a few days ago, and I checked it out, and it's pretty damn good. It has some bugs. Like right now, I have two-step authentication enabled, and it's having some issues with that.
Okay.
But I'm sure they'll fix it, and it's nice to see a native actual Windows Phone app, not like some kind of web view.
Yes.
The other thing is that, with the improvements they've made to notifications and stuff on 8.1, I find myself almost being productive enough on Windows Phone to potentially say I would live with it. But it's not quite there for the same reasons as you. I'm missing some key things, where's my Square Wallet app, for example? That's a big one.
I think if Microsoft just threw a little more money at the developers to fill in some of those lingering gaps, I think they would be on a roll. But it's
so speaking. No, for sure. Speaking of Microsoft, one of the big news it's been about a week or two now, but these layoffs, right? What is your take on Microsoft? Lots of changes this year. Satya Nadella, and we've seen all this great stuff at Build. You were there, right? I was there. We were both there. What do you where do you see Microsoft? Where are they at in your world? Where do you see them going? What do you think these layoffs mean? I mean, obviously, a lot of them are Nokia people.
Yeah.
So, what is your interpretation of it all?
I think Microsoft's in a really interesting place at the moment. I think they're finally catching up to this idea that they have a foot in lots of different camps: the gaming camp and the desktop PC camp and the notebook camp and the phone camp and the cloud, and are kind of joining those pieces together. And I think that's something that a lot of people have been complaining about for a long time. Windows Phone, I think, would have accelerated a lot quicker if they'd brought in more integration from things like Xbox. If they'd made Windows Phone the platform to have if you were an Xbox gamer. I think that it was a massive missed opportunity, and one that they just didn't seem to really bother filling in. You could have a look at your avatar on there, and that was basically it. I think the job layoffs are worrying in a sense, because there are an awful lot of incredibly talented people at Nokia, and I don't know enough about who is going and who is staying to be able to predict how that's going to affect what Nokia is actually doing. I think Nokia's problem sometimes was that the phones that they released and announced were only it was a very small percentage, in fact, of what they were actually doing. There was so much research going on there. If people didn't get the chance to go in and talk to all of the incredibly intelligent people doing really interesting
You
research.
and I have, though. We've talked to some of these people. It's mind-boggling.
It is. I mean, the things that they were doing. I look back 5 years at some of the stuff that they were doing with intelligent managing of social networks and contextual data. It's stuff that only now Google Now and kind of services like that are kind of picking up on. And Nokia was researching this, 5-10 years ago, but a lot of that just didn't kind of make it to the public consciousness, and people didn't think of Nokia as being an innovative brand, and they were hamstrung by Series 60. And I worry that projects like PureView, which are incredible,
amazing,
will now maybe we won't get another. I think Microsoft's obviously going to carry on with PureView, but I think we might not get the equivalent kind of groundbreaking, jaw-dropping technology advance in a different segment, because I worry that they are paring down that team too much, and I don't know how much emphasis they're still placing on R&D, but I worry. That's my concern.
Yeah, no, I think that's valid. I mean, but at the same time, by the same token, Microsoft has a history of pretty involved R&D, right? And so it's possible that they've kind of rolled these people into other projects in some way. I'll be curious to see what happens there. I feel the same way as you. I think that there's a, I knew the moment that Nokia was getting fully acquired. I mean, well, I know it's not all of Nokia. Nokia Networks is still around. Yeah. There's the HERE people, but I'm just saying that a big chunk of Nokia got acquired, and I knew that the moment this would happen was that, we're like losing that brand, and it's also means losing some innovation, and I think we're going to get that we're going to see that because of these layoffs. And certainly Microsoft has done a lot of innovating with their own research labs. Like, they were the first to do like photosynthesis, right? Like taking multiple pictures and turning them into a 3D view and that kind of stuff. It's kind of awesome. But at the same time, you're right, the PureView team is gold. And one of the differentiators from Nokia has always been imaging for mobile devices. So I hope they don't lose that edge.
I'd like to think that Microsoft kind of recognizes that that's a strength and kind of keeps that investment going. I think, if anything, my fear is that it will be the thing that would have come after PureView.
Yeah, for
Not
sure.
necessarily even in photography, but just in whatever.
In general,
that we now won't see because. Yeah.
So it looks clear that they're canning and getting rid of the Nokia X stuff, right? Like, I mean, it's interesting to me that they launched a Nokia X2, and then a week later they pretty much announced that they were dropping bye-bye to Android, right?
Yeah.
It's interesting to me. I'm wondering how much that has to do with, the layoff, like goes hand in hand with the layoffs in terms of there were strong rumors, I don't know if you heard them too, about them potentially working on a real Android device, like not a cut down Android device.
Yeah.
There's been these rumors forever, and of course then they got acquired by Microsoft, so of course it seems logical that they would get rid of that, right? Yeah. But I'm wondering if they hadn't done the layoffs, if anything would have come of it. What do you think? Because they don't seem to be able to dominate with Windows Phone, right?
I think it was really interesting, the Nokia X thing. I think that idea of taking something that Google were giving away that ran on incredibly cheap hardware that you could do what you wanted with, take out all of Google's marketplace stuff, take out everything, and do kind of what Amazon does with Fire OS. Take it as a framework and do as you will with it. Dress it up to look whatever you like, and kind of position it as this very affordable middle step in the range. And I think when it came down to it, that made sense for Nokia. I think as a kind of a stepping stone up to Windows Phone devices, I think that definitely made sense. I think for Microsoft, that kind of never made sense. Which
is why it was so surprising when they launched, this phone, the Nokia X, at Mobile Congress, because I was like, really? But I feel the same way. I think there was some value to it. They kind of executed it a little poorly, though. Those phones were a little too slow to really be, usable. But at the same time, we knew that they could do it right if they really wanted to. So my concern is that, I wasn't 100% convinced that, like, in the old Microsoft, the bombers of Microsoft, I could see them never wanting to touch Android ever. But I was thinking that perhaps with Satya Nadella at the helm, whose focus is purely on the cloud and mobile, right, basically, that he would necessarily not be completely averse to an Android-based Microsoft phone, because it's a means to an end. If it lets them sell or whatever more, people use more of the cloud services. It doesn't really matter. It's like the idea that, the kind of the pipe dream of like, which is going to happen now. Nokia Mix Radio on Android and iOS, right? I guess like conquer by adopting the competition's platform, right?
Well, I think it was about giving people the first taste they had of the cloud as being a Microsoft flavor rather than a Google flavor. And
yes.
And perhaps what kind of slightly undercut that proposition and for the idea of keeping an in-house sort of Android developing team at Microsoft was that Nokia is making, or there are now very affordable low-end Windows phones, like
it's true, the 530, for example.
Exactly, which are incredible handsets that you can pick up for ridiculously low prices on a prepaid, no contract, no nothing, just go in a box, you buy it, you don't have any commitment to it. Very good device, running the full OS. Just these are getting cheaper, and the chips are getting cheaper, and it's a really tough time, I think, at the moment to kind of have margins if you're a chip manufacturer, and it's kind of very competitive, and that's all working in the kind of the favor of the consumer.
No, I agree. I think, but I think there is some value to like what BlackBerry should have done a long time ago, which was put BBM on all platforms. It took them a long time to do that.
It did.
But I was always a proponent of them doing that because I could see, the value in it, and I think that, I would love to see some of the Microsoft's cloud features are pretty much available in everything more or less now, like OneDrive and a few others.
Mm-hmm.
But conversely, Nokia has had some pretty awesome apps that were pretty much mostly Windows Phone, like all the Here apps, right?
Yes.
The ability to do mapping really well and also do it offline. I mean, every time I go travel somewhere, I take a Nokia phone simply so that I can download the maps ahead of time and have something to,
to not just have the maps, but be able to do full navigation from it.
Exactly.
It's a huge benefit.
And so to me, like these are assets that would have been, and I'm a big fan of Nokia Mix Radio, but I mean these are two things that would have been really ripe to have on other platforms, and they kind of did Here maps for iOS and Android at one point, but it was a web view and it wasn't really counting,
No.
So we'll see how it goes, but it's going to be exciting and interesting to see what happens with Microsoft, because getting rid of that many Nokians is gotta hurt. Like this is not good.
Even if it doesn't hurt kind of on that kind of front line of R&D, I think it's going to hurt in terms of morale. People.
Absolutely.
People people worked at Nokia for a very long time. It was one of those companies that was very sticky in terms of people devoted their career to it.
Yes.
And when those people go, when it's a big change. Your family feels like it's changed.
And what does it mean for Finland too? Like, I mean, all these employees are still, a lot of them are in Finland, and Nokia is, was one of the biggest employers there. It's not a very big country with a lot of people.
Yeah.
So, are these people going to move away and to have to move to, London, Berlin, Paris, New York, San Francisco,
I think
Taipei, Tokyo, whatever.
I think one of the things that kind of to give credit to Nokia, and I'm guessing that will be carried on, is that when they have gotten rid of staff in the past, they have a really, really good sort of transition scheme to help kind of move people into a new position, and kind of they do a lot of funding startups that if people, former Nokians, kind of want to get together and work on something that perhaps they couldn't.
Like Yola.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, maybe it's slightly more successful than that, hopefully, but that kind of thing, and they do a really good job of kind of supporting that, and also in a way, benefiting from it in the future, because you can bet that they're keeping an eye on it to see if, well, is this something that actually we need to be thinking about acquiring, because this is something that we could benefit from.
For sure. So speaking of forked Android devices, I know I'm kind of changing the topic, but we did talk about the Nokia X's, and we did touch on the Fire Phone earlier.
We did.
I don't have one, but have you had a chance to play with one?
I have, yes. I reviewed it. The review went up.
You did the review, okay.
I did the review, yes.
So what is your take? I mean, I think the entire tech blogging world has pretty much resonated with very similar conclusions. So my gut tells me the same, but since I haven't actually touched one yet, I can't really. I can only say me too, but it's based on my thoughts, not my my hands on. So, what's your take?
It's it's an interesting phone. It's not quite what I thought Amazon would do in terms of phone.
What did you think they would do?
I thought that it was going to be. I thought they would follow a very similar model to the Fire HDX tablets, which would be push something out at a very competitive price. That, in a sense, is just a frame around Amazon content and services, and just makes it a lot easier for you to buy things and for them to deliver things that you have bought. Whether that be music or video rentals or a view into your Prime shopping cart. And I think the kind of the selling point I saw of it as a phone was that, well, okay, this is constantly in your pocket. I mean, HDX tablet, it probably lives on the table back home or on the bedside, the nightstand, whatever. Doesn't have an LTE option, whereas a phone is always connected. You'd be able to go around and be like, oh, well, this is $5 cheaper on Amazon rather than in this store, so I'm just going to order it from there. That's what I thought they were going to do. And then I thought that by taking that really strategically simple approach, they could push it out at a very low price, or even bundle it with a Prime membership, or do something interesting with the data charges like they did all those years ago with inclusive data on a Kindle e-reader.
Yeah, I am absolutely 100% behind your thoughts here. I think this is I was like, face plant, like, face palm thing, because I was like, really? Like, you're Jeff Bezos, a total, like, if I want my way, I'll get it, and you didn't work this out to make this possible, to basically extend what you've done with WhisperNet and with what you did with the Fire HDX. Like, to me, that was the way to go. That was absolutely the way to go. Sure, mention AT&T, mention that they're your partner, give them some love on stage, but make it so that your customer never has to ever deal with them, ever. Like,
make it as simple as shopping is.
Yeah, make it as simple as Amazon always is with everything, where, maybe you pay, with your Prime membership, you get free voice calls and free texts. And like just the bare bones basics to download books like you would with WhisperNet. But if you really want to like enjoy videos and music and the internet, you pay like $50 a month extra, and it's all you can eat. Like, there's no question to ask, and it's wonderful. And you pay Amazon automatically, and it's like prepaid basically. There's no contract.
Completely.
And at $199, that device for the specs is really not that compelling, right? No. Like, especially since like all the nerdy things about it, like the 4 cameras and the what's it called, the perspective thing, whatever they call it. That is right now, I mean, other than games, it's a gimmick. I don't really think it adds to the experience.
Even for games, it doesn't. I mean, I think two things. That one, as you were saying, like the shopping, it totally should have been included. I mean, why am I paying for the data I use to go shopping on Amazon's app on the Fire Phone? Surely, why aren't they giving me that free, for instance? Why am I paying them? Why am I paying AT&T for the privilege of shopping using Amazon's phone? But I think if anything, it seems like they lost their nerve a little. That they were like, we can't just do this being a store in your pocket. It needs to have something more. And so they went down. They were okay. Well, what do we do more? How do you differentiate a phone these days?
So this is kind of what I was getting to. Is that I think that the hardware is more complex in some ways than your generic mid-range high-end phone because of this additional hardware to give you this gimmicky thing. So like that to me was unnecessary and superfluous. If they had a full Google experience, at least they would have gotten the support from from us, the early adopters and the tech savvy. We would have said, we're not quite sure where they're going with this perspective view thing, but hey, this is Google Play Services, so it's a perfectly legit phone.
Yes.
And it sure, it adds a bit of complexity and battery life, but it justifies the cost because they're trying something new. Yeah. But we can't get excited if they can't get the early adopters and geeks excited about this feature. How at the price especially, how are they going to get the rest of the world excited about it? And then the other thing to me is that there are some strengths. Like Mayday is a really great feature. Arguably, I suppose that the Firefly stuff could become someday really, really awesome. I hear there's some issues with it. What's your take on that?
What surprised me was how little in the real world I ever needed to scan or recognize in order to, because I wanted to buy it online. I mean, one of the, as well as the kind of the shopping side of it, there's the ability to scan a business card, for instance, or
Right.
scan a phone number and then dial that straight away. And I found that actually, well, there are very few times when I do find myself copying down a phone number from a business card or from an advert or something. It wasn't very, there was no real need for it, I didn't feel.
No, there's no need for it, but you have to admit that it's cool and it
Oh
goes
yeah,
well
no,
with
completely.
it goes well with Amazon's intent, right?
It does
Which
completely.
is
I mean,
like, so that's kind of why I think like I don't see a big value in the long run with the UI stuff, but I do potentially see a value for Firefly, and of course Mayday is awesome.
I think
But
I think you're right, but I think then the problem is, of course, then that they've pitched it at that wrong audience, because
exactly.
the kind of people like you and me who already do an awful lot of shopping on Amazon, who don't kind of need to be, again, have our hands held into the online world of shopping and things. We don't really need having an advisor on our phone 24/7, and we don't really need
Correct.
some easy way of scanning a bottle of suntan lotion to be able to reorder it online. The kind of people who do are the sort of people who are buying phones like the Nokia Lumia 530, who want something affordable, easy, don't want the complexity, but who are still confused and would like to be able to say, well, okay, hello, Amazon Mayday person, how on earth do I do this? How do I bridge my traditional analog life with this new digital life that I'm trying to embrace?
I agree, and so it's like a disconnect to me. Like it's like a dual personality device, because it's too expensive. It doesn't give you the advantages that Amazon would normally give you of a WhisperNet built-in, you only pay Amazon kind of thing. And then it's too complex, right?
It's too complex to hit a price.
Yes, and it's too complex to use, from what I hear. Also, it's like it's not a very good experience.
I mean, it's not bad. It's just a bit gimmicky. I mean, after you sit there for a while, kind of look at it and think, oh, the icons are following me around. How fun! And it's like, well, okay, that's
so
great.
what? Right? But yeah, it makes it expensive to have that, which kind of defeats the purpose.
Yeah, and the Amazon Studios released a couple of games a day or two before the phone came out. I tried them out for the review, and it was like, well, okay, yeah, I can kind of look around the perspective in the game with dynamic perspective, but at the same time, I can do that with an accelerometer in a regular phone, and I didn't get any. There was no real extra benefit to using that system that I could see. And I think down the line, I'm guessing that they have some interesting ideas. I think being able to shop and being able to look around things and kind of have that feeling of, well,
I'm holding the object in my hand at the store. Yeah.
Looking in, being able to zoom in without having to kind of do anything, and just I can see that maybe there's an argument for that, but it's not there yet. And
yeah, so I think for me that's what it is. It's a disconnect between all these features, and things seem to be addressed to not the right audience, but at the same time, the audience that might be excited is kind of pushed away by, like that's us, pushed away by the price point for the feature set, and by the lack of the integrated data that you still have to get a contract with AT&T. So it's like and the fact that there's no Google services, is completely going to erase all of the people who, like us, are early adopters and are likely to be Halo adopters for the brand, right?
The people who recommend it to everyone else. Yeah.
I know that we probably have less influence than we think. Arguably, though, early adopters, tech savvy, the tech media, we are Halo people. Like in the same way as when you see Jeremy Clarkson talk about how awesome, whatever XYZ car is, the average person is going to go like, oh, well, maybe this is an aspirational thing I can look forward to. And maybe I can't afford to buy, a Ford GT40, but I can afford to buy a Fiesta ST.
Yes.
And so then they go and do it. And so I think that that's a missed opportunity. And I'm surprised. And a lot of people, every time I tell them they should have done this free WhisperNet rolled into the payment Amazon system for the data subscription, they say, well, it's the carriers. They're so strong and big. How could they possibly have done that? And I'm like, are you kidding me? This is fucking Jeff Bezos we're talking about. Yeah. He could have totally convinced them if he wanted to. He could have said, okay, you don't want to do it AT&T? Fine, we'll take this idea to T-Mobile. John Ledger will do it. or Verizon or something.
Yes.
It didn't seem like they tried. Like, this is, I could excuse all the experimenting, the faults around the hardware and the software that everybody describes, and the kind of wrong audience, and the fact that it doesn't have Google Play services, and the crazy price even. If I knew that they'd done it right in terms of the data connectivity, you know.
Yeah. Well, I think they. My suspicion is that they built it and they thought we have to throw the gimmicks in, and that pushed the price up. And then when you go to AT&T or a carrier and say, well, okay, this is how we want to subsidize this. This is the added extras we want to throw in. And AT&T said, well, hang on, this is a phone that you're selling $600 unlocked. You know, there is a limit to how much subsidy that is going to get applied to this, and they.
But I'm actually wondering, even if they if they could have made if they had gotten rid of the gimmicks, right? If they had gotten rid of I mean,
dynamic perspective. Yeah.
You know, maybe make a mid-range Snapdragon 400 phone without all these cameras, with a decent rear camera that didn't have to necessarily be 13 megapixels OIS.
Excellent camera, very good camera.
Very good camera, but like what I'm saying is maybe they could have just, you know, scaled down a little bit, and then you know, and then make something that is more likely to be appealing to people who don't need Google Play services.
Yeah.
And then sell that for 300. Like an Nexus 5 or like the OnePlus One, unsubsidized, and you get a year of free Prime. So now you have $100 of Prime plus $200, you know, $300 total, $200. Now you can say the handset's $200, but you're not subsidizing it.
No.
And you pay $50 a month and you've unlimited everything, and it's rolled into your Amazon account. If they'd done that, they'd be full of wind. People would be going crazy about it.
Yeah, I think it would have been a very different proposition to what they actually offered, which was a phone that has some interesting ideas, but doesn't really deliver on why you should care about them at this stage.
Yeah, it's interesting how everybody feels the same way. Part of me feels that Jeff Bezos and his team have been working on this for a long time. And that he kept adding these ideas, these pie-in-the-sky UIs and whatever things. And they were getting to a point where they had to ship this thing. Yeah. And in that process, they compromised the pricing, the data plan, a whole bunch of things that were, I think, at the core of what Amazon is about, and they screwed this up. So I think my take is forget the first Fire phone, wait for the second gen, wait for them to do it right.
I think, or wait 2 or 3 months for when the price comes down.
Right, that's the other option. Yeah. Because look, if you look at the original Kindle, I was very not convinced when Kindle came out. I was like, are you kidding? This thing is ugly. To this day, I maintain the original Kindle was a terribly ugly-looking device and terribly expensive.
Yeah.
And look at it now. I mean, now it's commodity. It's like you can almost go to 7-Eleven and buy a Kindle in a blister pack.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's a success story. I mean, that is full of win right there.
It really is. We have another question from Stefan.
Let's do more questions.
Okay. Stefan says, Dear Miriam, what's your tablet usage like today, and how has it changed during the past 6 to 12 months?
Oh, I'm not a tablet user, really. I mean, I have a few. I have a Nexus 7. I have a the current Nexus 7, like the second gen. I have a Nexus 10. And I have an iPad mini, or first gen, not the Retina one. Okay. And I think that's it for. Oh, that's not true. I have a Lumia 2520.
Yes.
Yeah, and I have original Surface. Yeah, that's right. And I have original Surface Pro as well. Okay. So I mean, but just because I have these devices doesn't mean I actually use them very much, you know. Okay. In terms of if I have to use a Windows, a full Windows PC, I actually have a Transformer Book T100, which I like a lot better. Okay. Which is both a tablet, like it's one of those Transformer, you know, it's a Windows 8.1 full-blown Windows, Intel Atom based, but it's a tablet that plugs into a keyboard, and I use it mostly essentially as a netbook. Okay. And to me, that's so that's also a tablet, but that's basically how I use it. I have the Surface Pro. I don't really use that much. In fact, I'm trying to sell it. The Nokia is a loaner, and honestly, I'm not a big fan of Windows RT because you can't. Like, to me, the advantage of Windows 8 or 8.1 or what it is now is that, you know, if you really want to, you can switch to classic mode and get all this legacy stuff running. And as a developer, you can start coding using Visual Studio and plug a mouse and keyboard into it, and you have a full PC. But with Windows RT, you kind of do what do you get that's better than an iPad? I mean, the iPad, in my opinion, is the best user experience for a tablet today. Arguably. The one I have is a review unit from Apple, but the two Nexus 7, Nexus 10s that I have work. The reason they work for me, and if I use a tablet more than anything, it's probably my Nexus 7. And the reason they work for me is because I only use my tablets I don't really watch videos. I don't use them for games, for music. I just basically use them for their web browser and the email client.
Right.
Mostly. And to me, being a Google services person, of course, the Google experience is going to be better for me using Gmail than the iPad experience for those things. But everything else, I think the iPad does quite a bit better than any of the other tablets I have.
Yeah. I mean, my kind of go-to tablet, there's an iPad Mini Retina, which I really like, and I do all my reading on there, and I use the web browser. It has all the email accounts, all the social stuff. I write a lot on there. I'll do full articles on there, though I will transfer it over to a regular laptop to actually do all the editing before it goes live. But I think the big difference there is that it's got LTE, which being able to get online anywhere,
Mine has
to think
too,
about, not having to figure out where is there going to be a Wi-Fi hotspot makes a huge difference, and it just. Yeah, and then we've got. Sorry, Karen.
I was saying the Lumia has that too. The LTE on a tablet. Do not underestimate the power of being able to use your tablet anytime, anywhere.
And it's something that I did underestimate for a long time, and I kind of thought, well, I can. If push comes to shove, I can tether from my phone. I can just share the Wi-Fi connection. But it doesn't. It's not quite as. It's just not quite there. It's kind of very similar to the difference of when you went from dial-up internet to always on broadband internet, and just that feeling of just being able to say, oh, well, I'm just going to check this, and there was the internet waiting for you, smiling. And,
No, I feel the same way. I think, honestly, right now, today, if I had to buy an iPad, a tablet of any kind, if I didn't have any and I had to commit my own money, because most of these things that I have, either the Surface Pro or review units, and I don't really know why I have a Surface Pro. That was a mistake, I think. I mean, don't get me wrong. I like the idea. I think the new one, the 3, is really compelling.
Very.
But now mine seems very obsolete. Like the battery life on it's not as well. So it's like, but if I had to pick one today, I'd buy an iPad Mini Retina. To me, it's the perfect form factor. It's a little bigger than the 7-inch. It's much smaller and more manageable than a 10-inch or whatever the iPad Air is, 9.7. Look, honestly, I have a MacBook Air 11, Core i7 Haswell, fully loaded, and you will never take that away from me. If I have to have one computing device in my life, this could be it. Because it does everything. And it's almost as small and light as an iPad Air to me. And it's so much more powerful. So really for me, my general purpose computer when I'm on the go is a MacBook Air 11 Core i7 Haswell. When I'm around the house here and the office at Pebble or up the street, 2 blocks away at the coffee shop, I bring my MacBook. I have a MacBook Pro Retina 15 Haswell as well. And it's fantastic, great battery life, super powerful. I generally run it mostly with the external graphics turned off, like just built-in graphics, so I get better battery life. But that thing, if I want to throw like something crazy at it, compute power-wise, I don't have to worry ever. And it's the fully loaded one as well. And that's really it. And that, but I do. Here's the thing. You do your writing on iPads because it gives you an ability to focus better, right? Because one app at a time. Even though you still get your notifications, they don't appear in little windows to the side of you. You still have that window of text in front of you as your main, right? Is that a focus thing for you?
Partly. I mean, it's, if I use it for writing, it's usually when I'm traveling. So you spend a lot of time on planes and things, or a lot of time waiting around in airports. And I just, I've gotten pretty quick on holding it.
Pretty good at it, yeah.
It's the right kind of size, just being able to flesh out kind of the idea of an editorial or a review, or just work on something, or if one of the team sends something over that needs editing, I can just quickly go in and.
So it's interesting because you know how I do this? It's like I need to write something. I have an idea right now. I need to jot it down and write something while I'm in line at the airport or something. I do that on my phone.
Well, if I'm in line, if I'm stood up, then usually it would be a phone. If I'm kind of sat waiting for a flight, I think we're in that kind of wonderful first world problem area where you have so many devices.
I know.
It's like, what shall I use now? Shall I use the phone, or shall I tell my smartwatch, or shall I?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's crazy. I think I carry my Nexus 7 with me everywhere I go, and my either my Air or my MacBook Pro, depending on how far from the house I go. If I'm going to get on an airplane, it's my Air for sure.
Okay.
For my MacBook. But you know what I use a lot for writing when I want to focus purely on writing and don't want to get distracted? Chromebooks.
And I think that's a really interesting...
Especially the Pixel, because it's Retina, it has a great keyboard, it's still light and slim, and it has LTE.
Yes.
And again, it's that magic of not having to worry when I'm gonna wherever I end up to connect to it. The drawback with the Pixel is, well, besides the price, thankfully mine I didn't pay for.
No.
But the drawback is the battery life. It doesn't have Haswell, so it's only 5 hours or something, which is not really that great. But if I have to hash something down that is need to focus on writing an article of some kind, to me, there's nothing more productive than the Chromebook.
Yeah, I think. My feeling is that we're going to start seeing some really interesting Chromebooks this year, in the kind of the latter half of this year, that will push that kind of the battery side of it. And
I agree. I mean, it's already there in a way, right? I pretty much have, well, up to about 2013, I have had every Chromebook ever made in my hands at some point.
Right.
Now I'm starting to lose track. I haven't played with the Samsung Chromebook 2 yet. There's a few that I'm missing, but the two that I have right now that I use are the Pixel and the HP one, the super cheap 11-inch, like, you can buy like and use as a doorstop without having to worry too much because it was so cheap you don't care.
Yeah.
And that one's great. Like that's the one I'm going to take to Burning Man. Right?
Okay.
Because even though I'm not going to be online much at Burning Man at all, if I do have to go online for whatever reason, I know where to find Wi-Fi since I'm staff, and I can not worry. I don't have to worry about this thing, right? It's solid state. There's no fan.
No.
If it gets dusty, who cares? I just fucking hose it down almost. It doesn't really matter. So I mean but yet it still gives me an experience of really typing.
Yes.
With a keyboard that's somewhat decent and a trackpad that somewhat works and a screen that's somewhat manageable.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of old school that way. I think the only way I could replicate this with an iPad or a tablet would be with one of those Logitech keyboards that they make for the iPad, which are really super slim and awesome.
Yeah, I know that James Kendrick, who I'm a big fan of, have been for many years, he swears by his dockable keyboards for tablets. And
for sure.
And so
Harry McCracken is another one. Harry uses almost exclusively an iPad with a Logitech keyboard.
I know, and is incredibly productive at it.
I mean, he's amazing. He's Harry McCracken.
Well, that's very true.
He's the master of all things.
I think we could fill another hour with just his name chanting.
I know. Speaking of which, our hour is up. Are there any other questions or any other things? Let's see. I'm looking on Twitter real quick. We've answered the questions. Interestingly, it's mostly our friend Stefan.
Well,
anything on the G pluses?
I'm going to let you look.
I'm looking.
Okay.
No, mostly very excited people asking how to download the podcast.
Well, that's good to know.
Well, it's okay. I'll tell them later.
Good. Don't keep that.
What can you do to pimp yourself and /gear and all that? Do you want to tell people where to find you?
Yeah, I mean you can find /gear at /gear.com or at /gear on the Twitter, or there's a /gear Facebook page and /gear on Google+. Everywhere you would expect to find /gear, basically. And I am C_Davies, Davies, on Twitter. I'm there on Google+ as well. There are lots of Chris Davies because we have a common name, but it has my happy smiling face. Thank you. I kind of look like this.
Awesome,
Chris Davies. To the distance. And yeah, so that's basically where you can find me.
Great. So don't hang up because we're going to continue this a little bit for the audience. But I wanted to thank you for being on and also let people know that they can find me on my blog, which is tnkgrl Mobile. It's tnkgrl without the vowels, tnkgrl.com. My Twitter is also tnkgrl, at tnkgrl. There is me somewhere on Facebook, somewhere on Google+. There's several of me on Google+, because I have several Gmails, and so the one that has a lot of Activity is very obvious, is the one. The other two, I actually have one single post that says, this is not Miriam Schwar's main
I need to
account.
do that.
Go
I
to
have
this
that
one.
problem. Yeah.
And then they can click on the link and it goes to the other one. So yeah, it's a good one to do. You'll find me on Instagram, on everything. I'm everywhere. I love to be everywhere. And thanks for joining the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks again, Chris. We'll be doing this again sometime, and you'll see me again next month sometime with a new guest. I'm going to Burning Man, so I'm not quite sure when the podcast is going to happen. It might be early September instead of late August.
Burning Cast.
Burning Cast. I should try to do that. It's going to be challenging, very challenging.
Well, the best things are.
Yes, indeed. So I'll catch you all next time. Thanks for joining, and thanks, Chris, again.